Last year I made a pizza oven that didn't work and everybody told me it was going to explode. And then this happened. But let's back that up and see what really happened here. Now I'm not saying this would never explode, but I did use it in my igloo for about 2 months, sometimes running 6 to 8 hours a day and never had any issue. I just don't think the small fire that's inside is hot enough to ruin the structural integrity of the concrete. But like I said before, this pizza oven didn't really work, so now I'm on a mission to build a new portable wood-fired pizza oven that really works and can cook me a good homemade wood-fired pizza in a couple of minutes. And I can take it with me to parties or wherever I'm going. So to start off, I stole all the bowls I could find from my mom's house, and this is basically going to be the interior mold of the oven, so I'm just going to build the whole thing around this. And what I finally ended up going with was this flower greenhouse dome from the dollar store that's about 12 by 12 inches. So I taped this onto a piece of scrap particle board I had lying around, and then I'm tracing a line 1.5 inches outside the dome as I want this to be the final wall thickness. Then after cutting it out with my jigsaw, I duplicated it using skills I can't reveal. Actually I can, I just traced it and cut out another one. Then I cut up some thick gauge wire to be a little bit of reinforcement for the concrete slab I'm about to pour. So to pour this slab I'm going to need some walls, and to do that I'm using some foam board. So I cut out 1.5 inch strip and then scored it about every 1/2 inch so it's a lot easier to bend. Then I just hot glued these in place as walls around the entire perimeter of one of the pieces of wood we cut. So for the slab base I'm making, I'm just using some sand concrete mix, and I mix it up to the consistency of about a big bowl of jello. And then before I pour it, I cut this piece of 1/4 inch plywood that's about 1.5 inches smaller than the mold in every direction. And then once I demold this slab, I'm going to fill this in with some refractory cement just to give it a little bit of added heat protection. So I filled it up about halfway with the concrete mix and then added in the reinforcement bars before topping it up with some fresh concrete. I then use my oscillating sander without any paper on it to vibrate the edge of the mold and release any of those air bubbles that are trapped in the concrete mix. And a day later that looks pretty good, but I'm going to leave it in the mold for now and move on to the body. So I have this dome taped onto our other sheet of wood, and then I made up this cardboard template that I'm going to use to cut out some wood that'll ultimately be the mold for the archway. I also cut out one piece that was 1.5 inches wider for the end cap of the mold. Then I could just cover up all the ribs with some foam board. And one last thing, I'm using this tin jar I got at a dollar store that's going to ultimately be my smokestack, but for now I'm just tacking it in place so that there'll be a spot for it in the concrete I'm about to do. So for the first layer, I'm just mixing up an insulating mix that's 1 part Portland cement to 5 parts perlite, and then enough water to get everything wet. This is a really lightweight concrete mix, plus the perlite helps insulate from the heat. Since the perlite is so lightweight and it basically acts as the gravel in the mix, so I just pack it in piece by piece until I can work my way up these walls and get a whole layer over the entire mold. This only took about 10 minutes to do the whole thing, but this happened a couple times. But the third time I finally got everything to stick, and after leaving it for a day, I can start on the second layer. For this layer, I'm using the sand concrete mix I used for the slab, and then mixing that in with about 1 part of the mix to 2 parts of perlite. I decided to switch to this for the second layer because since I have such a thin wall to work with because I'm building a mini pizza oven that I want to be portable, I think the sand in this gives it a little bit of extra strength and should hold everything together when I have to move it over to the slab. And this second layer made it look a lot more solid, and I'm ready to move on to the brick. So these are some thin concrete bricks I got off a local buy and sell, and as you can tell by the box, they are very local. So basically I'm just going to cut these up using my tile saw, and then I'm going to mortar them in place over the entire thing to make it look like it's basically a brick pizza oven. So before I get too far, I'm going to take out that tin smokestack I was talking about earlier. And then I'm going to sand off all the paint with some 120 grit. And using a cut-off wheel in my grinder, I cut off the closed end. And then painted it with some high-heat barbecue paint. Now back to bricklaying. Now with all the brick laid, I mixed up a slightly frothier batch of mortar, and I'm just going to squeeze this into all the gaps. I'm trying to be as careful as possible so that there's as little cleanup as possible, but you inevitably are going to get some on the surface of the bricks. But not to worry, you can clean it up about a half hour after it sets. What I found worked well is I'd go through and fill all the gaps for about 5 or 10 bricks, and then use my finger to pack all this in. Then once I had everything filled, I could go back to where I started, and it was already dry enough that I could use my finger and even out the mortar and make it look like a more respectable brick lay. Then I used a brush to even it out even further. As for all those mortar stains, you can just use a damp rag or a sponge and just slowly work them out, adding more water as needed until they're pretty much gone. You want to make sure you wipe all this off within an hour of doing the mortar, because otherwise it's going to be on there permanently. Now I'll let that cure for a couple days and back to demolding our base. After prying it off of the wood with a screwdriver, the indent we made looks pretty good, so I'm going to go ahead and fill that up with some of this refractory cement. This stuff is really gummy and thick since it's pretty much just clay, so I found adding a little bit of water made it a lot more workable. So I got it as smooth as I could, and after it cured for a day, it looked pretty good. Now to demolding the body of the pizza oven. Basically I cut away what I could with a box cutter and then scored along the bottom edge to help it release better. Now, I was worried about how structurally strong the shell would be, so I was trying to be really careful here, but after moving it around a bit, it felt really solid, so I flipped it up on its side, and I'm going to add a layer of refractory cement to the inside of it. So this batch I watered down quite a bit to get it into more of a paste, and then I just spread an even layer over the entire inside. Then I put a line of mortar along the base where the two pieces will join, and set the body in place. Next, I took a few pieces of scrap wood I had laying around and assembled this box that I'm going to use below the slab. Since the concrete's going to get really hot from the fire inside, this will raise the body up off of the table that it's sitting on. And once the wood glue dries, we'll glue it to the bottom of the slab. For the last part, I'm making a little steel door for the front. So I have this old barbecue door, but you can just use sheet metal or whatever kind of metal you have around. So I used one of the wooden arches I created for the mold to trace out a template. And then I drew on some little wings out the side and cut it out with a cutoff wheel. Once I had everything cut out to shape, I just scored a line around the bend lines and then put it in my vise and bent them to 90-degree angles. Then I drilled these 3/8 inch air holes at the bottom of the door to let in air even when the door is on and the fire can keep burning. Then drilled one hole for a doorknob and gave it some barbecue paint. And back to that wooden base, I just used some construction adhesive caulk to glue it to the bottom of the concrete. Now everything's cured for about a week, so it's time to light up my pizza oven for the first time. So I had the fire going for about 10 minutes before I put the pizza in, and then I used this barbecue brush to scrape everything towards the back so that there was room for the pizza. This is the first one I've made in this oven, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing or how long it was going to take. But after about a minute, I already had to pull it out because it was getting burnt on one side. So I pulled it out and turned it about a third and then put it back in and then did that once more. All in all, it cooked in about 4 minutes, and as I do more and more, I should be able to perfect the process even more and definitely get rid of those burnt crusts. But hey, even still, it was still delicious. So my goal was to make a portable wood-fired pizza oven that actually worked, and I would say I succeeded in that. It actually weighs less than I thought it was gonna. It's only about 45 pounds, and it's fairly easy to take around. I just buckle it in the seat of my car. It cooks a pizza in anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes, and you have to turn it 1 to 2 times. And besides that, I just love the way it looks, and I can't wait to show up to some parties to cook some pizzas. If you like this video, please consider subscribing. I do a whole bunch of build videos, and I try to spend as much time as I possibly can to make the best content possible.